Hi, and welcome to Deep Dive with Jamie Stein, where we take a deep dive look at all things reality TV, pop culture, and the world at large. I'm an intuitive and an empath, which means I pick up on the thoughts, feelings, and energy percolating in other people and the world around me. I believe there is meaning waiting to be found at every turn if you're willing to see it. So join me as we dismantle everything from trash TV to high spiritual concepts and learn more about ourselves, each other, and how we're all connected. Hey everyone, and welcome back to this bonus episode of Deep Dive with Jamie Stein. Very excited both for the guest and also the topic, which we're going to get into now. Just a little bit of housekeeping. This is a bonus episode, so fear not. Part 2 of the OC finale reunion episode is forthcoming. It's on the books. So that is coming down the pipeline. Like I said, this is a bonus episode just to satiate your appetite in the meantime. So let's get into it. So first, I want to bring out my guest, who is a very special guest to me personally, but also a very special guest in terms of this podcast, which I'll explain in a moment. This is someone who really, it's quite surprising and shocking that she's not been on up until now, although again, there are reasons which we'll explain. But this is one of my best friends of over 20 years. This is someone who I went to college with, studied abroad together. We were roommates when we first moved to Los Angeles together. Truly someone who's been there for literal decades. As they say, people enter your life for a reason, a season, or a lifetime. This is a lifetime friend and confidant and fellow traveler in this journey of life. And in terms of this podcast, she is also the one who was responsible to introducing me to the Real Housewives. And actually, a fun fact about her, she is because she won't own this herself, I will just say she is a bit of a covert pioneer or maverick, you could say, because she actually watched the series premiere of The Real Housewives of Orange County when it first aired way back when. She watched it in real time and she was an advocate for this show. And I remember her telling me about The Real Housewives of Orange County, and full admission, I was judgmental. I was never going to watch it. I was like, this is so trashy. And I literally have memories of being in my apartment in Koreatown in Los Angeles and us being on our landline phones and you breaking down the story of Tammy Knickerbocker and Lou Knickerbocker. And he had promised his daughters that they were going to get the inheritance. And then he died and the mail order bride got the inheritance. So, you kept planting seeds in my ears about the housewives. And eventually, I won't bore people with the details, but I was snuck in a snowstorm on the East Coast one winter and I gave in and watched, I think it was the first season finale of Atlanta. And that led into season 4 of OC, which was my official initiation. That is the season where Gretchen came on the scene, and we got the conflict between Tamara and Gretchen that is now 15 years later still going strong. And I remember texting you. I'm sure you don't remember this. Just a text that said, "I hate Vicky." Anyways, so she introduced me to The Real Housewives. So you could say she is the unofficial godmother to this podcast. Because had I not been watching The Housewives, I very likely would never have ended up on Bitch Sesh, and I would very likely not have this podcast, at least in this incarnation. So we all owe her a debt of gratitude. But above and beyond all of that, she is also, an incredibly intelligent, insightful, and thoughtful human being. She is a very successful and prolific writer, director, TV producer. I mean, her career goes way back, but, she was a major producer on the CBS hit Cold Case way back when. She created her own hit show, Memphis Beat, on TNT with Jason Lee. She's worked on The Sinner with Jessica Biel. And she's also a filmmaker in her own right. She wrote and directed The Lifeguard, starring Kristen Bell, which premiered at Sundance. She also wrote and directed 1% More Humid, award-winning, starring Alessandro Nivola. And most recently wrote and directed an Amazon Prime hit movie, Space Cadet, in addition to many other titles that you should go and research and watch. But yes, she is an incredibly, like I said, accomplished, ambitious, driven, prolific human being, mother to two wonderful boys, and reality TV aficionado. Please welcome to the podcast, Liz W. Garcia. Hi, Liz.
Oh, I can't believe it's finally happening. I'm so happy. Hi.
I know. Well, and just to speak to that, the only reason why you haven't been on is because you stopped watching these shows.
It's true.
I know.
It's true. I can't believe it. After so many years, I put in so many hours. I might find my way back.
Well, we have touched base about the fact that, we went to school with Boz. And she is now on The Real Housewives of Beverly Hills. And, as we were discussing, you are a Bravo fan from way back in the day. And I assume you watched the Rachel Zoe project back in the day. So she's back in action. So I feel like there's possible temptation for you to come back around to Beverly Hills.
Yeah. The temptation is real. And also you told me that I should be watching The Mormon Wives. And I have watched some of that, and it was really quite rich. So, yeah.
Oh, yeah. I haven't watched the latest season, though.
Well, I mean, I'm definitely not up to date on it. But I think the part of the reason I stopped watching The Housewives is because it became too meta as the women were too aware. And then it didn't feel, then it became sort of repellent to me. But that's not the case yet with what I've seen with the Mormon Wives. They're still they don't know quite yet how to create drama for TV. They're just being themselves.
Well, I do think what's working about some of these shows, I've mentioned this on podcasts before, I'm noticing a trend. It seems like when the shows are willing to acknowledge the meta aspect of these are influencers, these are TikTokers, these are people with OnlyFans accounts, when it just acknowledges this is the actual reality, as opposed to, I feel like we were in a phase for a while of trying to pretend that it was still another version of reality where they were casting the influencers, but trying to present them as the quote unquote, like old school real people. And I think the more they acknowledge, actually, this is the new reality, so we're just going to make a show about the new reality, it tends to work better because that is actually the new reality.
Yeah. That makes a lot of sense.
But these are big questions. I mean, I've been sitting with this and thinking about this a lot. Like I just keep feeling like, what's the next incarnation of reality TV? Because I feel like, speaking of Rachel Zoe, there was this kind of early phase of Bravo programming, the flipping outs and the blowouts and the Rachel Zoe. And then I think, the original Real Housewives was part of that, where it very much was much more kind of like a docudrama, candid reality series. And it hit this fever pitch. And then it did become so popular and prevalent. And then social media came on the scene, and it's now incarnated, to your point, as something that is more about the politics of fame and being on the show than it is their lives. And so for me, I just kind of keep I just keep feeling like something new needs and wants to emerge. And I'm curious what it is. And I'm curious when it's going to happen.
Well, are the franchises all still really successful? There may not be a need for change.
That's the problem.
Yeah.
What were you going to say?
Well, just that I would love to see the next incarnation of all this be somehow having all these people kind of stripped of the stuff that's been built up over the seasons, meaning the wealth, like that they're all making money, that the show is spending money to send them on these vacations. There are these sort of manufactured set pieces and less of their actual lives. Like, I wouldn't mind if they were like stuck somewhere isolated together. where there wasn't even time to manufacture storylines. It was just like, here are our different personalities. Here's what happens.
Well, I think that's where, in some ways, it's been headed. I don't think you've watched any of the girls' trips, the Real Housewives girls' trips, where they're throwing different Real Housewives together. But it speaks more to what you're talking about, where, first of all, it's a limited run. They're just filming for 1 or 2 weeks. Yeah, and they're in a particular setting, which, you know, and I think it works in terms of where we are in Bravo, because there's like a nostalgia factor if we get to revisit with people that we love, but we're not necessarily investing in the commitment of, you know, an 18 episode season after season, where they then feel this pressure to manufacture some kind of storyline for the sake of preserving their job and staying on the show. But I agree with you. I've been feeling something similar. I mean, because I feel like what you're speaking to in a way is going back to more of an old school formula. I mean, very much like The Real World. That was The Real World. The cast changed every season, and they were in a house together for 5 months. And it was about the story that emerged in those 5 months. And that was basically the end of it. And then, I mean, even in terms of the girls trip analogy, then we had the challenges where we could revisit our favorite personalities here and there. But I agree. I mean, I think there is something perhaps about getting back to the roots of, yeah, maybe more concentrated productions, you know, that are set in a concentrated period of time. And yeah, maybe if there's a way to remove the social media aspect and just sort of get back to the roots of it. And I think, to your point, what's interesting about what you're saying is almost like taking people who have become very much maybe enslaved to their public persona or over-identify with their public persona, taking that away from them and seeing what happens when, you know, this group of women or whomever are in, a more stripped down environment with just themselves.
Yeah. I mean, what was interesting to me, really fascinating to me about the early days of OC was that it was about real housewives. It was about real women. And so you got to see, like, Vicky obviously has always been dedicated to insurance, but it's like she had a life where she was doing her job. There were other women who were single moms or recently divorced or trying to be married, like Slade and Joe, or trying to sort of change their class status. But now all of the women are the same thing. They're all housewives, which has become something else. So they're all well-paid, recognizable reality stars. And that sort of permeates every aspect of their lives. And I therefore find them less interesting, and it's less like anthropological. You're not looking at women dealing with, in my opinion, you're not getting these sort of clear stories about how different women deal with different marriages and different money struggles.
Mm-hmm. I mean, it really is almost like you would have to return to a real world-esque formula where you're getting people who are fresh off the boat, so to speak, capturing them at a certain point in their lives. It's like lightning in a bottle. And then, then if the show's successful, send them off to the island of, okay, you're a reality star now. You can go do House of Villains. You can go do the girls' trips. You can make that your career if you want. But to at least have that first season, you know, where it's not about, I mean, again, though, if you still know that that's coming, I guess in some ways these are still people who want to be, this is what I'm saying. It's like, where do we go from here?
No, it's like Survivor. Like everyone who goes on Survivor now knows how to play Survivor because they've watched so many seasons of it. There's no going back.
I know. And I mean, I love that we are actually here to talk about something else, but yeah, you know, in terms of just in terms of drawing energetic patterns to, you know, what's going on in the collective, that notion of there's no going back. I mean, I do feel like in some ways that is a reflection of the state of the world today. I feel it now more than ever, especially having moved to New Mexico. And then when I go back to Boston or, you know, when I'm out in the world again, I just feel like post-COVID and even post-smartphone, like when I was back in my hometown, because I do go back to my hometown for the holidays. Like literally my parents live in the same house that I was literally brought home from the hospital to this house that I go back to when I go back to my hometown for the holidays. But it really struck me this time, you know, my hometown literally feels different than when I was growing up. It is a different place. It's busier. It's more congested. But just by virtue of smartphones, I was just like, oh, everyone's addicted to their phone. Everyone's
Mm-hmm.
overstimulated. And I, as an energetically sensitive being, I feel this. And life
Mm-hmm.
in this place feels different. And it actually initiated a very deep grieving process for me of realizing, oh, wait, no, the world has changed. And that's why I can't, at least right now, live in big cities anymore, because I don't feel comfortable in this world anymore. And so anyways, I'm just saying, it's just that notion of, and I was sitting with this sense. I actually ended up talking to Piper while I was away, of like, the wheels have come off and there's no going back. And I feel like we weren't warned. And this is the world we live in. Something has fundamentally changed. And when are we going to catch up with that, be in reality about that? And how are we going to deal with that? And so it just feels like something similar with reality TV, which again, it's called reality. It's reflecting something of reality. Like, there's no going back, I don't think, to what it once was. And where do we go from there? I don't know.
I don't either. I have similarly dark feelings about the wheels coming off.
Well, okay. Well, then I know we've been joking about the fact that we're about to jump into content that's 20 years old, which I'll get to in a moment. But maybe it's fitting in a moment that we are going back 20 years to a time that was simpler. And actually, I really was thinking about it when I was watching the movie. I watched, as you know, I watch movies all the time. And I'm always thinking about this when I watch older movies. But I was so aware of, there are no smartphones in this movie. They're not texting each other. Again, I don't want to repeat myself, but even just watching these films from an older time, it really hit something in me, as like you, someone who grew up, without smartphones, without internet, and just to go back to a time that just felt so different. I hate saying this because it sounds so banal, but it really in some ways was there was just space, there was energetic space. I just watched Mastermind with Josh O'Connor, which actually takes place in Boston in the 70s. And it was just such a similar thing of watching these characters navigate a world of payphones. Anyways, I'm getting so far afield. Okay, you guys. So to orient to the topic at hand that I'm so excited about, we are doing a bonus episode. We're getting into the movies. The movies. I've wanted to do this for a long time. I mentioned this here and there, but for anyone who doesn't know, my background is in film. I had a career basically as a story analyst for a long time before I'm doing what I'm doing. I worked for the Sundance Film Institute for 10 plus years, taught screenwriting at Wesleyan University, and had my own individual business as a script consultant. Liz, as I mentioned, is a filmmaker, writer, director, producer. She also does her own script consultation work. And I am a film lover first and foremost. And I love getting into movies because I would say, it's not a competition, but perhaps even more than something like reality TV, I think the content that we watch on the big screen is such a potential mirror into what is going on in the collective unconscious, because these stories, these aren't just human beings who kind of offer their real lives as archetypes on TV. These are people who are, whether they think of it this way or not, they are summoning the images, symbols, and archetypal characters that are available to them through their particular psyche. And in my mind, my thinking, they are drawing upon, what is that? They're drawing upon the collective unconscious to bring these stories through. And then because of the wide, what's the word I'm looking for? The wide reach of movies, in particular the movies that come out of America and the movies that come out of Hollywood, these stories have an impact. They have an impact in terms of who they're coming through. They have an impact in terms of the way they're told, in terms of the way they're edited. So they come from the collective unconscious. They're filtered through an individual who writes the script. Then they're, of course, filtered through many individuals who participate in making the movie. And then those images get projected onto a screen that we, the audience, go and see. And it becomes part of what informs the collective unconscious. So, I'm always feeling like movies are so important in terms of how they both reveal and also inform culture and what's going on culturally in humanity. And I always love the idea of bringing consciousness to that. And even in my script consultation work, what I ended up doing in the last iterations of it was actually really helping people to understand how this story that they were channeling was actually in some ways a retelling of their own personal myth, or there was something they were working through individually, and supporting them to work through it so that they could actually bring that wisdom to tell the story on the page in a complete conscious way. So first of all, so that it is truly the story they actually wanted to tell, but also so what they're putting out there is actually, what we could call like a complete picture, rather than kind of taking incomplete stabs in the dark and kind of halfway getting there. And I don't know, maybe unintentionally reinforcing destructive messages because they haven't sort of found their way around the issue yet. So that is all just to say, I've always loved the idea of bringing film and movies into this podcast. And I was in Arizona, and there's this streaming platform called the Criterion Channel, which everyone should go get. And they had a gallery they were featuring early 2000s horror movies. And one of the movies was What Lies Beneath, the Robert Zemeckis film with Harrison Ford and Michelle Pfeiffer. I will get into this a bit in a moment. Liz knows this about me. I am a huge Michelle Pfeiffer devotee.
Mm-hmm. The biggest.
Even just saying her name, I'm looking, I shouldn't be sharing this, but I've got like photographs of my different like archetypal muses and patron saints, and she's right there. She's just such a creative touchstone for me, and I've loved her since I was a kid. So I was like, you know what, let me revisit I remember not like finding it mediocre back when it came out, but I was like, let me revisit it. And when I was watching it, I was like, it's interesting. I still think this is mediocre in a lot of ways, but what I found interesting about it when I was watching it was, in some ways, this is kind of ahead of its time, in the sense that I feel like there's, in a lot of what I've been tracking, there's a big announcement of what I would call the dark feminine, the empowered dark feminine, the call, like the need for the wise, powerful feminine who's tapped into intuitive knowing and the shadow side of life. And if you want to watch a great movie about that, last year's Nosferatu, I think, did that so beautifully. But I was like, these themes are alive in this movie. And I was sort of taking that in. I was like, oh, this movie was kind of onto something back in the day. And then, speaking of, feminine intuition and, the inner workings of life, I get this random DM from Liz on Instagram because she saw like a 2-minute clip of the movie posted by the Criterion Channel Instagram account. And you literally said something, and you're just from the one clip, you were like, oh, this looks really interesting about, like, I forget what you said, but something to the effect of like a woman who's tapped into a knowing and she's not being taken seriously. And I was like, actually, it's funny you say that. I was just watching this movie and thinking about that. Maybe we should get into this on the podcast. And it felt like kind of a synchronistic doorway to enter the realm of film and movies and storytelling, and to get you here in the deep dive. So that is the framework for today's episode. What I will say is spoilers abound. So if you haven't seen the movie and you want to watch the movie, definitely feel free to hit pause, go watch it, and then come back, because there are quote unquote twists and turns. Otherwise, if you've seen the movie, enjoy. If you haven't seen the movie, as always, we're going to be exploring the deeper themes of the movie. So I think this podcast, this particular episode, and these movie episodes can be for the seekers. We're going to be dismantling, what's really sort of going on a deeper level within the world of the movie, and what that might be revealing about us as individuals, but also as a collective. And also, I think we'll get into our perception of whether it works, it doesn't work, and just from a storytelling perspective, maybe sort of what we would have done differently for the movie to be a bit more successful. So, like I said, this is for the seekers, this is for the film lovers, this is for the storytellers and the screenwriters and the writers out there. And we're just going to kind of jump in and have some fun.
Right on.
All right. So are you ready to go, having said all that?
Yeah.
So I just kind of feel like let's keep it loose and easy. Like I said, we haven't talked about it together since that DM. So I know you sent me that DM based on that one clip of the movie. I'm suddenly realizing, do we need to frame what the movie is about? I guess that makes sense, right?
Yeah. I mean, so we saw it in theaters together. I think.
Did we see it together?
Yeah. I think, what was it, 2000? Or
something like that,
Yeah. And I experienced the movie just sort of on the surface level at that time as being about Michelle Pfeiffer plays the devoted wife to Harrison Ford, who is a sort of academic and a scientist. And it's a ghost story. She starts experiencing sort of supernatural happenings in her house and sort of investigating. She soon links the supernatural stuff in her house to a local woman who's missing. And she starts to investigate that. And it eventually leads back to her husband. And I think what made me reach out to you is because the clip that was online I think, was this double date scene where it's the two of them, Michelle Pfeiffer and Harrison Ford, and they're with characters we hardly see again, just friends of theirs. And it's like a sort of similar setup with sort of a serious, like academic male and then a younger woman. And in the scene, Harrison Ford brings up the fact that Michelle Pfeiffer has been experiencing the supernatural in their home, and he's really snide about it. And the other husband is really snide. But the other wife or girlfriend immediately says, I completely believe that stuff. And watching that, I realized, oh, this movie is not about a sort of weak wife who is married to a psychopath. This movie is actually about husbands and wives, men and women. It's a much larger story, just using the two of them to talk about gender dynamics around sort of information, like where do women get information? Where do men get information? Who's treated as a credible authority? Who is not? And looking at it on that level, this sort of allegory about the dangers of ignoring your intuitions, this time around, I found it really rich.
Well, do you want to say more about that? Sort of what you took in this time around?
I felt like it was, as you had said, sort of ahead of its time, because again, it wasn't Gaslight, which is from a long time ago. It wasn't just the story of a man doing his woman wrong, lying to her. Harrison Ford's been lying to her about the fact that he knew this woman and that he was involved in her death.
I mean, he murdered her.
He murdered her. I don't know why I'm holding back. He murdered her. There are two other female characters who Michelle Pfeiffer is interacting with. Like, she has a neighbor who we meet in like minute 1 or 2 of the movie, who is in this stormy marriage, and she and her husband have these loud fights that Michelle Pfeiffer can hear from her house. And she becomes kind of obsessed with spying on this woman. And is she okay? And what's happening with her? And has the husband done something to her? And also increasingly obsessed with this other woman who has gone missing, who she thinks is now a ghost in her house. And all three of them are blonde. They all look like Michelle Pfeiffer. I mean, they're not just, I don't think it's just the Hitchcock blonde. I think it's this concept of that essentially the heroine is looking at different versions of herself. You can look at the movie literally, and it's interesting. But the fact that they do these sort of 3 iterations of women who are in danger from their intimate relationships, again, makes the story much bigger and makes it this sort of like this cautionary tale about how time and again women are not taken seriously, that women, especially who are, you call it dark feminine, I was just sort of thinking like women who are spiritual, who are getting information from themselves, from their gut instincts, or getting information from feeling a spiritual presence, whether that's a ghost or an ancestor or sort of talisman. At one point, Michelle Pfeiffer has like a lock of hair from this missing woman, and it gives her all these insights. And that information, as we see in this movie, is not taken seriously by people who are considered serious. So these men like Harrison Ford, who's a scientist, right? He doesn't take her intuition, his wife's intuition, seriously, as though that's not information, when in fact the information she has is urgent and turns out to be credible.
Yeah, well, and as you're talking, it not only is it urgent and credible, it's actually a threat to him,
Yes, yes,
right?
yes.
Because her intuition leads her to discover the truth about his
Yeah.
shadow side. And I guess maybe even speaking of shadow side, I think I've clarified this before, but never hurts to clarify things again. When I say dark feminine, for people listening at home, that's not to mean dark as in evil or bad. The way I mean it, and I also want to be clear that these are energies that can live in everyone. So the masculine in me, the feminine in me, the masculine in Liz, the feminine in Liz. And actually, I have a very deep relationship to the dark feminine. That's how I do what I do. But, in this case, feminine, what I'm assigning feminine attributes, intuition, sensitivity, connection to the unseen realms. This is about the inner life as opposed to the external outer life. And the dark aspect for me just means shadow, like what's in shadows, what's hidden, what's hiding or lurking in the shadows that, is really waiting for illumination. And actually dark feminine. And this is why I'm saying there's actually a desire or an invitation for that force to be reclaimed in all of us by the world right now. It is the notion of it's a powerful thing. It's shining a light on that which has stayed hidden. So that's again, just for people at home, that's sort of what I mean about the dark feminine. But yeah, to your point that it's actually like this oppressive masculine force in this world, this movie that wants to dismiss it and not take it seriously. It's not even just about having authority. It's about the fact that Michelle Pfeiffer's wisdom and inner knowing is an active threat to Harrison Ford because she's going to excavate his shadow. And if she excavates his shadow, he's going to have the answers for what he's done in the shadows.
Yeah, yeah. And Rosemary's Baby is one of my favorite movies for many reasons, but one being it also uses genre, the sort of thriller horror genre, to take a look at the sort of horror of patriarchy. And a big point that Rosemary's Baby makes, that's made in that movie, is that it has to do with information and women's access to information and women's access to each other. And the evil forces in Rosemary's Baby want to keep Rosemary from doctors. They want to keep her from her friends, her female friends, because they tell her the truth and they don't want her to have information and have the truth. They don't want her to take this. She keeps saying something's wrong, right? Because she's pregnant with the devil's spawn and she keeps saying something is wrong because she knows. And when her friends, her female friends see her, they say something is wrong. But her husband, who's arranged this devil baby thing, like a key means of controlling her is cutting her off from people who would validate her strong instincts.
Yeah, and it's interesting. I mean, just in terms of making connections between the two, it's interesting because the driving force, I believe it's been a long time since I've seen Rosemary's Baby, but the husband makes a deal with the devil in order to get success as an actor.
Yeah.
Correct? And then with Harrison Ford, well, the movie gets quite convoluted with the backstory. And I want to touch on the backstory because I think there's both a lot of rich information and questions there, but also because I think it's a place where the movie starts to get very confused and convoluted. Because I was saying this to you, it's like this movie actually could have been What Lies Beneath could have been so good. It could have been so good. Because to your point, there's such thematic richness there. I have a lot of thoughts about where it went wrong, both narratively, but like structurally, like the way that it was told. But Harrison Ford, we could say there's a whole backstory, very thin, not very well developed backstory about Harrison Ford feeling stymied by his own professor father. Clearly, there's like competition there. And at one point, Michelle Pfeiffer says something to the effect of, you wanted me to just basically be like your trophy, like the perfect wife, to be the perfect family, to impress your father. And that felt, when finally there's the revelation of the affair, that he had an affair with Madison, who's played by Amber Valletta, who's the girl that he has killed, who's now haunting the house. Yeah, like basically it comes out that he was looking, he felt sort of unseen, unheard by Michelle Pfeiffer, unappreciated. And he was looking for someone to, feed and fuel him as a man. And so I guess it's just interesting. I guess the correlation that I'm making here is that in both cases, it feels like, in terms of the deal with the devil, literally in Rosemary's Baby, it's sort of a strive for outward success.
Yeah.
In terms of Harrison Ford, the figurative deal with the devil, in terms of having an affair with his student, is about an inflated sense of power, an inflated sense of control. If we bring in the father aspect, an inflated sense of like masculine self from someone who otherwise feels emasculated. So it's just kind of, in terms of like laying out the energetic groundwork, it's interesting to see. It's almost like they represent, if we remove masculine energy even from biological men and just equate it with the drive in all of us to penetrate the world for external success, it's, in both cases, we're seeing that get distorted.
Mm-hmm.
It's success for the sake of success. It's success for the sake of ego. It's success for the sake of proving something about the individual, as opposed to serving the collective, as opposed to serving the great feminine, which that's sort of how I always see it, is like the great feminine is kind of like the governing principle. Masculine energy serves the great feminine. And then within that, part of that is, there are these women who have this deep intuitive knowing, or could have intuitive knowing if they had access to information and resources. So it's like we've got to shut that down so that we can preserve this distorted quest for some sort of false sense of like power, success, control, or ego.
There's this great moment, I thought, in What Lies Beneath, where she's in the bathroom. And first of all, I know there's the whole water thing, that the body is in the water and that's why the body's sort of showing up in the bathroom, but also like bathrooms are such a female space. I loved that was sort of the site of some of the most dramatic scenes. But there's the scene where the bathroom's all steamy and she turns around and sees that some unseen hand has written on the bathroom mirror, and she goes immediately, she screams, and she runs to find Harrison Ford, and he's in his office, like his home office, and he's working, of course. And as soon as she starts to say like, and this is happening, and I saw this, that's when he says, "Are you trying to undermine me? That I'm working really hard at work? And are you doing this to try to sabotage me?" And I thought that was an example of where the movie was really smart in these kind of subtle ways, pointing out the difference between what she knows, her information, and then his information. He's a scientist. He's working. He supposedly sort of runs his whole life around information. And that in his mind, his information is much more, and what he does with it is much more important than what she's doing with hers.
Mm-hmm. And, as you say this, it's like what comes to me, and maybe this is stating the obvious, how in an ideal scenario, what we're really looking for is an integration of the two. Because both spheres of information, just like the masculine and feminine, like, the feminine sensitivity, gestation, call to go inward, that is deeply important. And the masculine drive to penetrate the world, take action, achieve things for the sake of highest good, that is really important too. And they work together in an integrated dance, ideally, right? And even, he is literally a scientist, but, as someone who's always been very spiritual and been spiritually bent, I've also had a deep affinity for science. And I never knew what I was talking about, but I've just always had this like knowing in me. It's like, it's not either or. It's not mysticism or science. It's like they go hand in hand, and then it turns out Albert Einstein, Isaac Newton, there's so many physicists who are also mystics in that, again, it's this notion of they actually go hand in hand. It's like, science, again, I don't know that we're ever going to have all the answers to all the unknowable questions, but it's the idea that there is this great impenetrable mystery out there. And then through working through the laws of science, we start to piece together puzzles of the mystery. But I don't know, that just jumped out at me. Just that I'm suddenly like seeing her in his office. Yeah. And to your point, it's like, in terms of the context of the movie, in that moment, she's presenting as like the hysterical female. And then he's like the stern, dismissive man. And it's this notion that both sources of information are actually valuable and needed. It's just the willingness for them to coexist and to work together as an integrated union, as opposed to one or the other.
Yeah. Well, I don't think the movie is just criticizing him for dismissing her. I think that he is sort of this archetype, like he walks around in his Harvard t-shirt. I think the movie is critiquing the whole system that takes masculine energy and masculine information more seriously. And he's the example of that.
Well, and also, I think, and this is what I really want to get into, where I think it gets really interesting. There's self-responsibility, right, for Michelle Pfeiffer's character to take. Like, what really drew me in terms of the backstory. So the backstory, which again, actually is quite convoluted. I think it's probably more convoluted than it needs to be, but she was this brilliant cellist. And she apparently had a successful career. I think if I recall correctly, she was married to I think he may have been another
musician.
Yeah, another musician. They had a daughter together. He dies. And then I guess she's on tour with their daughter. And she meets Harrison Ford. Again, this is where it gets convoluted. I mean, when they're fighting at one point says, because she says to him, I gave up everything for you, my music. And that's what I want to come back to, because that's what I'm so drawn to here.
Mm-hmm.
And then he says in response, you were all too happy to give it up. You were traveling alone with a daughter and you were all too happy to give it up, which I thought, I was like, okay, that's an interesting wrinkle. But what I'm drawn to in Michelle, because what I'm drawn to in this movie in a lot of ways is, first of all, and this is where they kind of just really, they just kind of abandoned. It's sort of once we have the plot twist that Harrison Ford murdered Madison, it just sort of shifts into this Hollywood. Now he's trying to kill Michelle Pfeiffer. And it kind of, in my mind, doesn't really take responsibility for the deep emotional implications of what we just watched. Because what I'm sort of sitting here saying is Michelle Pfeiffer married a murderer. And there's something here about this notion of what it means to wake up to the fact that you have chosen a partnership, a life, and a home, not with just someone who's betraying you, but in this instance, whether it's metaphorical or literal, there's a monster in the house. And even as I'm saying this, suddenly I'm just thinking about I know you don't really watch it, but I know you're aware of it, Ariana and Tom Sandoval on Vanderpump Rules. And I remember when I would kind of intuitively drop into Ariana in the wake of Scandival, sometimes feeling this possibility of just feeling so, I'm getting chills as I'm saying this, disturbed of realizing what I've been living with this whole time. What was operating beneath the surface of our home this whole time. But much like with Ariana, what I was drawn to with Michelle Pfeiffer is, well, why did she make this? Suddenly I'm feeling really sad. It's interesting. These are fictional characters, but I'm having empathic responses as if they're real. Why did she give up her music? Why did she turn her back on being a cellist? What? Because and that's where I was this movie could have been so interesting, because I noticed what you noticed, which is Amber Valletta's character, and also that neighbor who gets swept away in the highs and lows of this romantic relationship. I'm this is the fiery, emotional, creative, feminine. Oh, and it should be said, Amber Valletta's character, Madison, her whole thing is that she's this firecracker. We don't know that much about her. And again, this is where I would have done the movie differently. I wish.
But she went to Princeton. We know she went to Princeton.
Well, she got
and
into
that's
Princeton.
Important. She was an A student.
This is what,
and she.
Well, yeah, no, this is what I'm saying. It's so what I was going to say is I wish this character had been so much more of a presence and a character in the movie. And we can get into that in terms of we're going to talk about how we would have restructured it. But yeah, this character, she was wild. She was freewheeling. She was carefree. She was up at all hours of the night. She has a disapproving mother who is just going to feed you regular coffee. She doesn't fuss with that mocha nonsense. But Madison was this free spirit. And also and we also know she was feisty and rebellious because she had these confrontations with Harrison Ford. I think he killed her because she was I'm going to tell your wife about this.
Yeah.
And to your point, she was really smart and she got into Princeton and she got into all the good schools. And so, I was just so aware it's this fiery, feisty, uncontrollable, untamed feminine. The neighbor next door, loving hard, fighting hard. And she literally says to Michelle Pfeiffer when they finally have a chance to get together, she's because Michelle Pfeiffer had seen her, there's this whole red herring in the first half of the movie where basically Michelle Pfeiffer thinks the neighbor has killed his wife. And she initially thinks the paranormal occurrences that are happening in their house is this dead neighbor trying to communicate to her. Then it comes out the wife's actually alive and the dead ghost is actually Amber Valletta. But when she realizes the neighbor is alive, they have this sort of moment where they get to know each other, and the neighbor feels bad, and she's like, I realize why you thought something may have happened, because you caught me in a moment where I was like hysterical. And I think when she was hysterical, she was saying something like, do you remember what she was saying? She was saying, I mean, it's so ridiculous, like the way they set
I
up this
don't
red herring.
remember.
But she was just saying something like, I don't know if I'm going to live. I don't know if I'm going to survive. And then when she explains it to Michelle Pfeiffer later, she's like, do you ever feel so consumed by love for someone that you think you're going to cease to exist? So again, it's just someone else who's fiery, who's passionate, who's tempestuous. So again, this is all just to say, I was just so drawn to Michelle Pfeiffer's character in this choice that and who is this cellist, this brilliant cellist, who's clearly sensitive, who's clearly intuitive, who clearly knows things on a deeper level. And she made this choice to shut it down and to marry Harrison Ford and to be this sort of good wife and mother. And I wish the movie had explored that more, because that's a moment where she made a choice. And I mean, I know she's not a real person, but I'm so curious about that choice. Like, why did she turn her back on her music? Why
so interesting. I don't have those questions, because for me, that did not need to be explained. I felt like this is what women do. They're promised security, especially they made her sort of more vulnerable because she was a widow and had a baby. Women choose security, and that is the devil's bargain. And it's been done throughout history. And so I didn't even think about it. I was like, yes, that's what she did. And she didn't know it would be this bad. And I think the neighbor subplot makes more sense to me when I think of it as actually sort of just a parallel story about Claire, Michelle Pfeiffer's character. Almost like if you imagine that the movie is almost like Michelle Pfeiffer's hallucination, her character's hallucination. She has this truth that is dying to break free from the first moment of the movie when Amber Valletta's face under the water dissolves over Michelle Pfeiffer's face, and she sits up out of the bath gasping like she's been drowning. And she just, like, from the first moment of the movie, she is fighting to not realize this truth. And so I think the whole thing with the neighbor is almost like she is hallucinating her own story. She can't admit that it's her story, that she's trapped in a toxic marriage. So when the neighbor says, do you ever have that feeling of being so caught up with someone that you lose yourself? That was information. I took it as information about Claire. That is what happened, that she got so caught up with Harrison Ford that she, however it's phrased, like lost herself or dissolved into him or something like that.
Yeah, well, I like what you're saying. I mean, the way that let me repeat back what I'm hearing you say. It's like almost, that there's this systemic piece of a single mom traveling around, perhaps being, what we call like a struggling musician. Her partner in crime has died. Maybe she doesn't trust herself to make it work, or, and so then this, big, strong Han Solo comes in and says, I'll make it okay. I'll take care of you. I'll take care of your daughter. And so she makes that choice. And then in making that choice, she shuts something down in herself. Yes. She turns back on her music and what feels like her connection to fiery, passionate life force energy, and kind of winds up in this situation where, because that's the thing, what lies beneath? Yes, it's the secret of Harrison Ford's distortion and destruction, but what lies beneath, to our point, is also her, what we could call her feminine power, her inner knowing, her intuition. The part of her knows something is fucking off.
Yes.
And then like the real choice point for her, and I was exploring this, as sort of in the wake of the movie. And I feel like this, in some ways, again, I think the movie could have developed this so much better, but I think thematically there was really something here about, I just hear the question, like, do you really want to know? Like, if you're going to choose to look under the hood, you can choose to look under the hood and you're going to find some answers, but also those answers are going to come with some real consequences. You're not just looking under like the hood of the ghost story and Harrison Ford's hood. You're looking under your own fucking hood too.
Yeah. I mean, think about how the movie ends. It's dark. She's at the cemetery. It's snowing, and she visits Madison's grave. Madison has finally been laid to rest because because of Michelle Pfeiffer. Her body has been found, but it's completely silent. She lays a flower on the gravestone and then she walks away, and it's just this wide shot. It's like black and white because of the snow, basically. She found herself. She found this other woman. She and the ghost helped each other. She has truth, but she is all alone walking among the tombstones.
Mm-hmm. Well, that's why it's funny that, you were bringing up Rosemary's Baby, because I was thinking about Rosemary's Baby, because when I was watching the movie, I was so curious about this character of Claire. And I wanted to know so much more about her. And so the reason why I'm talking about Rosemary's Baby is because I was like, what I wish this movie had been, because, it's very much like, it's Robert Zemeckis. It's like a slick, glossy, broad Hollywood thriller. And I was like, what I really wish this had been was kind of like a more intimate character study.
Yeah,
of this
I completely
woman,
agree.
And that we get to know her. Yeah, we get into the ins and outs of this household. I mean, I actually have even more radical thoughts about how they should have changed this narratively, which I'll get into in a second. But yeah, that we could have really sort of been on a journey, and that the story really is a woman having a reckoning, with her own powerful inner knowing, her own life force, her own passionate, fiery temper, that she finds the Madison within her. And in doing so, brings completion to Madison's story. That's why I also wish we had found out more about Madison. I keep getting this image, and I see it 70s style, like that grainy kind of like more independent feeling, where she is like obsessed with Madison and finding out about Madison. And Madison, kind of like what you're saying, but in a more developed level, becomes this touchstone for her. It's like Madison is the inner her. And following her own intuition to honor Madison's story, it unlocks something passionate and fiery in her, which then brings Madison's story to completion, which I feel like is essentially what the movie was doing, but it was doing it in the most slick, broad way. But yeah, what do you want to say?
Well, I mean, I think most of what you're saying was on the page. And for me, there was a disconnect between the content, which was, as I said, like kind of ahead of its time in terms of looking at oppressive systems and sort of valuing women's intuition and spirituality. And then the way that it was directed and shot, which was much more kind of like objective. Like, we're with Michelle Pfeiffer. We know she's credible because we're alongside her. But I didn't feel like I was in her head. Felt like it was sort of classically shot, and it was neat and it was clean. And the form robbed us of some of the emotion, which is, and just like really located it in the genre, sort of shaved down the more radical aspects of it.
Which is it, because I completely agree with you. And I can also, I guess you could make a counter argument. One could make a counter argument that, again, I don't think this was intentional at all, but it's just interesting in terms of like, for the sake of looking at things from different angles, I guess one could argue the form, what we might call the kind of glossy, broad, not getting into the heart of the matter form. One might argue that reflects the kind of hollow aspect of like the oppressive system itself and the fire that we're not ever really getting to. Especially because, it's like Robert Zemeckis, like, and even the fact that it's like an old-fashioned, polished Hollywood movie, which, we could get into Hollywood as its own vehicle for the patriarchy and, the way that system is set up. Obviously, like, there's been huge reckonings with that, and I'm sure there's much, much more reckoning to come. It's interesting to think about it. Or one could almost argue like, well, maybe the form makes sense in that regard and it's saying something about the content. And you could also look at it the other way, which is almost like the movie is trapped in its own prison, which kind of goes back to what I was saying before in working with writers. It's like, if the thing hasn't gotten completely worked out yet, you might be getting kind of a halfway version of it. Because even if we went with the idea that somehow the form is like meaningful in a creative, artistic way, the fact is, I still think for that to fully work, by the end, something would have to break through. And we'd need that, like in terms of form, we'd need some sort of expression of that unhinged, fiery feminine. It's like, I don't know what that would even look like, but the movie would suddenly have to take some sort of left turn, I think, that just really represents the idea of like this feminine force breaking through the traditional Hollywood form, which didn't happen.
I feel slightly wistful when you're saying that, because there's that moment where that's in the climax where Michelle Pfeiffer's fighting for her life. Harrison Ford has tried in various ways to kill her. And now he has effectively driven their car into this body of water and they're trapped in the car. The car is sinking. And then we see another car and a body rise up from it. And that's, of course, Madison's body. And we see her sort of as her beautiful self. So we know who it is. And then she kind of turns into this ghoul and she reaches up and pulls Harrison Ford down to the depths, to his watery grave. So that's just women looking out for each other. She's helping Michelle Pfeiffer, saving her and killing Harrison Ford. And that is the kind of eruption of feminine energy. But I mean, it is on the page. Like the notion of it, of
Right.
this ghost saving her is very moving, but the way that it's done, where she kind of transforms into this ghoul, like I get that that's, I guess, a nod to the genre, but it prioritizes the genre over what you're saying, which is this idea of these women sort of helping one another.
I actually don't feel like it fully developed the ghost story aspect enough. I actually felt the ghost story aspect was very glossed over to its detriment. And this is actually, if I had to rewrite this movie, this is what I would do. And brace yourself, because I'm going to be getting rid of some stuff that, per our conversation, I do think held sort of interesting thematic elements. But for me, because what I thought was missing from this in terms of the first half was really the journey that Claire goes on to believe in ghosts. It felt pretty easy for her to make that leap. And there was I felt like something got robbed there, because again, there's kind of this notion of, is Claire crazy? And I guess just to fill in some more of the dots, the movie starts with her kid going off to college. So there's like empty nest syndrome. And we know, there's things sort of unsettled in her psyche. And so there's always, again, we as the audience don't really question her sanity, but ostensibly in the world of the movie, there's this question about her mental health. And even her friend is a little bit concerned for her at the beginning. And so there's this trajectory of Claire kind of being a quote unquote normal person to someone who becomes a believer in ghosts, and I just want to say, like, again, even narratively, like the whole ghost, much like Madison herself, I just feel like it was so, I don't know, it just felt like it was so skimmed through. It's like her friend just is like, okay, by the way, I know you've been observing like strange things that could be paranormal activity. Here's this book I just picked up at an occult shop. And then Michelle Pfeiffer just kind of leads through the book and sees some spell. And then, I don't know, there was something about it that was just so, like I said, it just felt like it skimmed through it in a very superficial way. What I would have loved to have seen, this whole red herring with the neighbor where she thinks the neighbor's gotten killed and she's investigating that. To me, I just feel like that suffocates the first half of the movie. I would have loved to have just chucked that and really make this kind of, and also to your point, establish the inner world of this character, Claire, played by Michelle Pfeiffer. Really get into this kind of, externally happy, but repressed, kind of quote unquote normie woman who's sort of navigating a strangely, like, again, everything normal on the surface, but eerie world, navigating empty nest syndrome. And then strange things start happening. And really being with her as she starts to like, wait, could this be parent? Like, you know what I mean? But having her really come from the point of view of as someone who's like, I've never even entertained the notion of ghosts or paranormal activity before. That's not in my wheelhouse. I am now opening up to this. Let me find someone who knows about this. Let me ask about this. Let me start to investigate this in secret. And then when I finally make the decision that I believe in this, it's actually a big deal. It is like someone who never believed in this stuff and maybe thought it was like for fools saying, no, wait, I believe in this. And then having the arc of, and maybe hiding it from Harrison Ford or whatever. And the arc of the journey, like I said, becoming about, I think it's this girl. Let me look into the world of this girl. Let this girl become a character. And like, literally like picking up an investigation into like who this girl was, what she was doing it, where it leads, like going on a journey with it so that the ghost aspect comes into much sharper relief. Like I feel like The Sixth Sense, even though I think it's so overrated, that did such a better job of this notion of ghosts who have unfinished business in the world. And like that's the driving, like they need someone to help them. And I thought that's what was missing of like Madison as this otherworldly character who needs someone to fight for her and is trying to get Michelle's attention, and Michelle's journey of, I don't believe in this. Oh, wait, there is a ghost knocking on my door. I believe in it. I need to fight for this. And this is taking me somewhere. And honoring the depth of the ghost story in a much more committed way. Does this make sense?
Yeah, I can picture that. And if I were to do my version of the movie, it would not be more ghost story. It would be more, is she crazy? What's wrong with her? Like setting so that we're in her head a little bit more. And also, I like this idea that from minute one, the truth is trying to come out of her and she is stuffing it down. So if in the first 10 minutes you're seeing that she's like has strange allergies or is having strange headaches, like things are happening to her and she's being treated like she's nuts. And then she's hearing things. And is she nuts? And then she thinks she's seeing something. Oh, she forgot. Did she leave the door open? Did she not? So it's like in my version of it, the ghost story she would think the ghost story was the answer to what was wrong with her. And in fact, what's wrong with her is the same thing as the ghost story, which is that there is a truth that she does not want to acknowledge because it will cost her everything.
No, I agree with it. No, I think we're saying the same thing. Because in my version, going more towards the ghost story, that's what I was trying to say about her arc of believing in the ghost. And I think you kind of brought it in a more succinct way. It's like, it's almost like a high stakes decision because there's already this question about her mental fragility. So to choose to believe in this, yeah, it's a high stakes decision. And so, yeah, that notion of really going all in on, it's almost like I'm just seeing the like headlining question, the subtextual question for like the beginning of the movie, like what's wrong with Claire? Just again, being introduced to this woman where everything on the surface seems great. She's like a normal woman, happy marriage, like living in this great home. But there's kind of this question about like something off with Claire. Yeah, her being kind of gaslit into questioning her perception of things. And then on top, like things start to happen. So for her to like look into it, for her to choose to believe it, for her to go after it, it's like her taking a chance on her own perception, and it's her risking something. And then really through that, like going towards Madison and her story and putting together that investigation, not only does it flesh Madison out more, but it also, I think, heightens Claire's predicament in terms of what you're talking about. So that kind of like what we're both saying, by the time she gets to that final moment, and this is what I was saying before, it's like, and that's why I also like the idea of her, of course, feeling compelled to do right by Madison because she's receiving these clues from her, but the more that she learns about her, in some ways like being inspired by her, not like it has to be in an on the nose way, but like thematically that like there's a kinship.
Yeah, a kinship. Like there's a version of the movie where Claire is much more buttoned up, much more staid, conventional. And then Madison seems like her foil. And they're doing this a little bit. I love that they had the thing where Madison possesses her essentially, and that she's like Yeah, I mean, it's great. And that she's kind of like sexually assaulting Harrison Ford. I mean, that's a great moment that sort of weds the genre with this underlying idea of the truth is already inside you. You are uncomfortably possessed by the truth already. But I was also just thinking as you were talking, like there's a version of this movie, yeah, with Claire as sort of more exaggeratedly stayed or repressed. But also there's a version of this movie in every time period I can think of. Like I thought, like, gosh, I'd love to watch this set in the 50s. And then I thought, yeah, you know what? And I'd love to watch it about a trad wife now. I mean, I do like that the really like it a lot, that the sort of essential scaffolding of a genre movie about a woman who does not want to realize the truth about her husband because her whole life is in his hands. It's timeless, sadly.
Well, that's why, I mean, like, again, I go back to, I was going to make this point earlier, going back to Tom and Ariana on Vanderpump Rules, and I feel like if we were to like distill a moral of the story in the most reductive, simple way, but I think it's an important moral of the story because, look, believe me, this is what I'm exploring with clients all the fucking time is, where are you ignoring the red flags? Where are you turning a blind eye to the shit that's right in front of you? Where are you turning away from the monster inside the house? Because to your point, I loved how you kind of framed this, or someone framed it. I think we've been bringing in this idea of the deal with the devil. And I think you mentioned, like, in a way, unconsciously, or maybe even consciously, Michelle Pfeiffer was making her own deal with the devil by turning her back on her music and marrying Harrison Ford. And I feel like, there has been a lot of conversation in the wake of Scandal of like, yeah, the choices that Ariana made to be with this guy because of what it afforded her, both in terms of, I mean, again, was he the breadwinner in a systemic type of way? No, although I think there is a lot to be said about his position on the show and the way that their relationship gave her a starring role on the show. So I do think, even though she wasn't dependent on him, for survival, there was an aspect of this of like choosing the job, I think, in a way, but also, like because, I don't know if you know this, but she had come out of abusive relationships. And initially, Tom was someone who was like a shoulder for her. And, I think initially he felt, especially the way that he presented, like the nice, understanding guy. And I think obviously there was an investment in wanting that to work. I also think in terms of Ariana, she's someone who's also very prideful. And so I think, and then you see this a lot in these shows, like people who just double down on their relationships, even when they're like, people are saying like, hey, like, is this sort of a little something off here? But anyway, sorry, coming back to the original point, just this idea that, obviously there were things I'm sure we know that Ariana was clocking the whole time. And she didn't want to look at it all the way because she didn't want to deal with looking under the hood and having to deal with that truth in a real way. And then boom, the monster comes out of the house. And so I would just say, for anyone listening to this, like, I can never stress this enough. And I want to like say this with every fiber of my being, because it sounds like a cliche and it sounds banal, but speaking to like the spirit of the movie, it's like, don't minimize your intuition. Like, don't ignore those. When there is that voice inside you being like, something about this doesn't fucking feel right. But I don't feel like I have a right to say that. I question myself. I don't want to look or whatever it is. It's like, don't do it. That is your powerful intuition. That is your powerful knowing. And it's something inside you that's alerting you to the fact that something is not right here.
Well, I love that. Again, that this movie to me is an example of the right use of genre to tell a story that is much deeper, because the stakes for women in this world, realizing the truth of what they're putting up with and articulating it, are actually life and death. So she calls Harrison Ford out, tells him to tell the truth, and he tries to kill her. It's like, it's a great use of genre, great use of metaphor.
Yeah. And it's interesting too, if I can just bring in one last wrinkle, unless, was there anything else you wanted to say?
No, wrinkle.
It
Go
was
ahead.
interesting too, because I watched this. So I watched, Michelle Pfeiffer just came out with this Amazon Prime movie, this Christmas movie called Oh, What Fun. Actually directed by Michael Showalter and co-starring Dennis Leary and Jason Schwartzman. Whatever. I'm not going to knock the movie, but I think anyone who's a diehard Michelle Pfeiffer fan always kind of knows it's a little bit of you're a little bit of a glutton for punishment because she's so dynamic and brilliant and compelling. And yeah, there have been some, here and there's actually been some good, Fabulous Baker Boys is great, Married to the Mob. And, but it tends to be the case that Michelle Pfeiffer is the best thing in whatever she's doing. And especially now, obviously she's older, right? So roles for older women are fewer and further between. But, watching her as a passionate Michelle Pfeiffer fan, watching her in Oh, What Fun, and just wishing to see her in something deeper and darker. And then, so it was interesting to watch her in What Lies Beneath. And again, just if we sort of zoom out the lens to the macro level, this notion of an artist turning her back on her art or not honoring the depth of her own sort of dark feminine. And obviously Michelle Pfeiffer has not turned her back on her art. She's like a A-list movie star. But I was thinking about, for example, she turned down Silence of the Lambs because she felt it was too dark.
Oh, she would have been so good. Oh my God.
Right? I think about that a little. She would have been so good in that role. Because other roles, she turned down Thelma and Louise too, but it's which don't get me wrong, I would have loved to see her in it, but Susan Sarandon was perfect in that. And I'm not, guys, I'm not insulting Jodie Foster, so don't come at me, but still, that Clarice Starling, that is a fucking Michelle Pfeiffer role, if there ever was one. And so I don't know, again, in the place of pattern, there was just this part of me that was I wonder if there's even something here, in terms of metaphor and pattern, something even in Michelle Pfeiffer about, is there something in her that unconsciously has perhaps stayed away from the true kind of depth, darkness, just chaotic kind of work that she really...
So interesting that you would say that, because one of the things I noticed that she does in What Lies Beneath that only she could do, that is so fucking smart, is there are, in the back half of the movie, when she's starting to be on to Harrison Ford, there are moments where she's alone and she kind of lets her mask drop. And the look on her face is so cold. It's almost evil. It's like you're watching Catwoman. It's like a little slice of her Catwoman performance. And it's not every actor would make that choice, because not every actor can go to that really extreme, almost villainous point. And it's so great when she does it in this movie because it links her to Madison, because Madison's performance, the Amber Valletta character, is much more sort of vampy. And of course, she's a ghost, so she's more villainous. So it's a great choice. It's already suggesting the link between them and that maybe this possession has started. But also, it's acknowledging everything that she is repressing, just being in this life. It's implying that when she stops trying and when she's just by herself, she is so fucking angry and she's so cunning. It's a thrilling kind of shadow moment that only she could do, because as you're saying, she has this real, these real dark depths.
Well, and just in terms of honoring her performance, there's a set piece in the middle of this movie when she does get first, you mentioned it, she gets first possessed by Madison's ghost. And she, like you said, is basically sexually assaulting Harrison Ford. And then so she's in that psychosexual demonic possession. And then she snaps out of it. And that's the moment where she realizes that Harrison Ford has cheated on her in the past with Madison. The way that she shifts from femme fatale, paranormal villainess to jilted, heartbroken wife who has just discovered or re-remembered that her husband has cheated on her. I'm getting chills just talking about it. The range in that one set piece, every time I watch it, I'm it just reminds me, this is why I think You are like truly a legend among legends and just one of the most powerhouse actresses of our lifetime. But to your point, and then that was the thing. It's like I was watching Oh What Fun, and there are these moments where she's just looking at there's one moment in Oh What Fun where she's like in a motel where she's like on her road trip as like, you know, this suburban mom who's rebelling and fleeing her family at Christmas time. And she's in this motel and it's like a dark motel. And by this point, you know, her character's along on the journey. So her hair is really messy. And it actually reminded me of like Selena Kyle, like that's Catwoman's the alter ego. Selena Kyle is like the human. But she had this kind of Catwoman-esque look to her. Her eyes were so bright in the darkness. And she's sort of like looking at the camera. And to your point, I was like, in the best way, I was like, she is so fucking weird. And I was like, this is what I love about her. Like, she's so weird. And like going back to Catwoman, right? Because that, you know, Catwoman, everyone knows, right? Who's seen it? Like that performance, that is what I'm talking about. That is the most live wire, unhinged in the best way, like just tapped into something so thrilling and dynamic and electric on screen. And so that's always why I'm like, that's fucking Michelle Pfeiffer. And as a Michelle Pfeiffer fan, I'm always like, I just wanted you, maybe this is just my demand on her. I'm like, I just always wanted you to be doing work like that. I wanted you to be doing independent movies. Like, like that's who Michelle Pfeiffer is. Sorry, I feel like I'm, I'm getting a little bit lost. But yeah, no, I was just thinking about like her career basically. And just that notion of, is she someone, has she let herself fully embody her own flame?
Has she given up her proverbial cello?
Yeah, because even with Catwoman, it's just interesting, right? And by the way, this is part of what I've always loved about her is she's a movie star and a character actress at the same time. And I think that's very rare. I think it's very old school. I think that, you know, it's like very Gary Cooper, you know, but it's like very rare. I think now in these days, you're either a character actor or you're a movie star. And let's face it, the art of movie stardom is now very much dying in this age of social media. But, you know, she's like a character actor who happens to be a movie star. And I do love that about her. And I think that's part of her mystery, you know, and sort of she's like a shapeshifter in that way. But conversely, it's interesting, like the Catwoman performance, it happened in the context of this big Hollywood blockbuster. It's almost like there's always these, I almost want to say like these guardrails, you know, over this fucking like artist in her, you know? So it's, I don't know. It's just interesting. These are just things that I think about. Okay. Yeah. No, well, I don't have any. Do you have any? Okay. All right. Well, do you have anything else to say at this moment?
Just that this discussion has made me think of all of the movies that I want to discuss with you.
Well, no, this was so fun. I'm so grateful that you stopped by. And yeah, I would absolutely love to do more of this. And we were a little short on time because we had some technical difficulties starting. So yeah, there's so much more we can get into. But for now, Liz, tell people where they should find you. I don't know if there's anything they should be watching now or if you're offering script consultation services or where you are.
Oh, yeah. I mean, if you go on Twitter or Threads or Instagram, where I'm Liz Garcia Official, you can find a link to my script consultation services, which I offer on a case-by-case basis throughout the year, but really love doing. And if you want to watch my last movie, Space Cadet, which is a family-friendly PG-13 comedy starring Emma Roberts, you can find it on Amazon Prime.
Okay, great. And as always, you can find me on Instagram, Jamie Stein, JAMIESTE. And you can head over to my website, hollywoodreadings.com, if you're curious about my work. And yeah, let us know if you liked us exploring movies. And if you want more, I would love to do more. And maybe we could even announce the movie ahead of time so people can watch it.
Oh, yeah, that would be so fun.
We can start a little movie club.
Yeah, and maybe people have suggestions about movies.
That's true.
I think we're onto something with these kind of like metaphor movies.
Well, they all are. That's what I love about them.
Ideally, yes.
Well, even if they don't know they are.
You're right.
All right. Yeah. So that's it for now, guys. I don't know when exactly this is going to be released, but it's somewhere around the holidays. So I hope everyone's having a great holiday. I'm wishing everyone a happy New Year 2026. Thank you all so much for being here. Like I said, there's a part 2 coming to the OC episode. And yeah, I will definitely see you guys on the flip side in this post-COVID universe where the wheels have come off and we're all just sort of looking for the next iteration of reality. Bye.
Mwah.